And Tonku and his wife Annie had found Earl, and then Earl got taken away, disappeared, and they saw him being taken away, but they weren't really sure where he ended up. Well, they finally figured it out, and he's in a monastery in France. So they make their way to France, and they book a retreat. So that's their guys. They're hoping to find him there, and then get him out of there and rescue him. And they've already met a priest named Father Rule, who they're not sure where Father Rule is, on whose side he's really on, because he claims to be Earl's friend, and he claims to also be on the side of truth, regardless of where the truth is. But they're not sure what exactly that means. So they're still a little leery about Father Rule and you know, where he actually stands. So Tonku and Annie are at the monastery, and they've left their little room. And so Tonku and Annie walked hand in hand across the main courtyard to the chapel of Notre Dame. That's the name of the chapel in the monastery, not the real name. Tonku loved the smoothness of Annie's fingers interlaced in his. The warmth of her fingertips lounged on the back of his knuckles, belying the danger that he and Annie were in. A couple of tall trees with green leaves shaded the stone walkway in the courtyard. Tonku opened the chapel's thick wooden door for Annie and walked in behind her, still holding her hand. He suppressed a gasp and quickly pulled her back when he saw Father Rule talking to a man. With his short haircut and long neck, the man reminded him of one of the men who looked into his car and got into the BMW that chased him. Father Rule and the other man had their backs to the entry. Tonku backed up against the wall, hoping that neither of the men would turn around. He maneuvered himself and Annie into the confessional booth, to be out of sight and still be within earshot. They barely fit together inside the old hand-carved wooden confessional booth. His shoulder touched the dark wooden confessional door. He scooted over as they knelt down on the kneeler. Gratitude oozed from Tonku's knees as they rested on the kneeler's soft padding. Father Rule and the other man spoke in German. Tonku put his cell phone on record mode. I hope the phone's battery doesn't die before they finish talking, he thought. Time crawled on its belly for 10 minutes before Annie tugged on Tonku's sleeve. He bent toward her. I don't feel safe in here, she whispered. We can't see anything and there's no way to escape. We've been here too long already. She heaved a heavy sigh. Someone might come and find us and then ask us what we are doing here together. Peek outside and let's leave as soon as we can. Tonku raised his hand to tell Annie to wait until the peace conversation was over, and then he realized it was too dark for her to see his hand in the confessional booth. He whispered, I think I heard them say they were leaving. The men's voices grew louder, indicating that they were walking in their direction. One of the men stopped in front of the confessional. He inhaled deeply. His now loud inhalation squeezed through the crack of the confessional door, slithered into Tonku's ear and stopped him from breathing. Tonku opened his eyes wide, hoping to see better in the dim light. He scanned the confessional door, looking for something to grab that would give him a means to keep the door closed. Nothing protruded from the door to give him hope. Hendrik, you want to go to confession? Father Rule asked in German. Hendrik did not answer immediately. Tonku waited and held his cell phone against the door jamb. Asse ik hasse sie, Hendrik said. Hate? He hates her? Who is he talking about? Tonku wondered. He heard Hendrik tell Father Rule that he wasn't ready to forgive her yet. Jens is still working with that horrible woman I told you about, Hendrik said in German. I think he is wasting his time. The computers have been cleaned of all personal files. Annie stood up from the kneeler and pulled Tonku up. He knew that she would burst through the door and knock anyone in her way if someone opened the door. He reached behind and took Annie's hand, as much to calm himself as to calm her. He held up his hand in front of her face, hoping that she could see that he was telling her to wait. Wouldn't be surprised if that woman informed Tonku's son before we got there, Hendrik said in German. My son? Computers? Personal files? Mine? Tonku wondered. She has to be someone we both know. Who could that be? His thoughts distracted him from hearing what Father Rule said next. He heard something about confession or confessional and worried that Father Rule might step into the priest's side and that Hendrik might open the door and expose them. The tension from Annie's hand squeezed his hand harder. She must have felt me tighten up, he thought. He responded to her tightening grip by squeezing her hand and then releasing its hold. He placed his cell phone in his front pants pocket. Then he put both hands on the door, readying himself to shove the door against anyone who might open it. The moisture from his hands made the door feel slick. The cell phone rang. Tonku almost shoved the door open, thinking that the phone might be his or Annie's. He heard Annie suppress a yelp and hoped the two men outside didn't hear her. A sliver of light blazed through the door jamb. Tonku bit his upper lip. He could see Father Will talking on the cell phone, looking in his direction. The other man must be standing in front of the door, Tonku thought. His arm muscles grew tighter and tighter as he held the door sliver open, fearing if he let it close, Father Rule would see it. So if you want to find out what's going to happen, you're going to have to buy the book. So I want to thank everyone who read. That really means a lot to me. And I want to thank all of you for coming. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
And the books are for sale at the counter.
Buy books.
Please buy books. So does anybody have any questions since I'm here to answer any questions you might have?
Are you teaching a class this semester at college? Are you teaching at the Long Beach State?
In January, I'll be teaching the class.
January. Okay, good.
And you're teaching what?
I'm teaching a class on Introduction to the World of Shamans in the ONI program at Cal State Long Beach.
Now, am I old enough?
Barely.
I'm just a punk.
You got a question back there?
Yeah, I was wondering, like, did you write your book yourself, or do you have a team that can help you, write your book, or is it like a team thing?
No, it's not a team thing, except for the fact that we all get together, several of us do, and we meet on Thursdays, and we read to each other what we have already written, and then we all critique it. And we tell them what we like about it, and we tell us, nobody really says what really sucks, but we should be telling you if any part sucks, we should say that.
Okay.
You know, and John, who is a retired professor of English literature, will occasionally notice things in the way we are writing, and he'll prompt the whole group into an exercise. And and it's one of the blessings that we have that John is there. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
No, but having a writers group is really, really terrific, because that's the incentive that we all have to continue writing, because life gets in the way. We get busy, we get stuff, whereas if we know we have to produce, we produce. And some people have an outline, they already know what they're going to write, they have a pretty good idea as to how they do it. And some of us don't work that way. Some of us let the story unfold, and we have no idea where it's going.
Yeah.
And with my book, with the exception of my first book, which is Vietnam Body Count, which deals with my first 3 months in Vietnam, since I already knew that story, it was just a matter of pulling it together. The other stories that I've written start off usually as a prompt or as a short story, and then eventually become a book. Once it gets going, it has its own momentum. And then I'm as excited to find out what's going to happen as hopefully the readers will be as well.
Okay.
How did you get your name? I've been curious the whole time.
Okay,
Omelets.
okay, who here does not know how I got my name? All right.
A few.
It's a worthy story.
Yeah. My parents did not give me that name.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I did not really give myself that name either.
Okay.
I was in the Navy twice during the Vietnam fiasco, not through choice, but by unfortunate circumstance. So the second time I went in, they gave me a sea bag, and they said, we're not going to send you back to boot camp. We're sending you directly to firefighting school. And show up in San Francisco, on Treasure Island, and for God's sake, get a haircut before you show up. I had shoulder-length hair, and I showed up in full uniform, beard, long hair. They had a cow. And so they sent me back and forth to get a haircut 4 times. In the meantime, all these recruits are just getting out of boot camp, were showing up at the school, are watching this hippie get harassed. So the next morning, we all show up at the school at 6 o'clock in the morning. They call everybody's name out alphabetically, and they skip mine. So I'm thinking, oh shit. They're gonna put me up, and they're gonna sit there and use me as an example. You know, I asked for it. So they finally call my name out after everybody's done, and they go, Montoya, come up here. So I'm thinking, okay, fine. So I go up, and they say, you're the senior ranking person here, so you're in charge of these 35 guys. You're the class leader.
Okay.
So after a week of putting out electrical fires, fuel fires, wooden fires, practicing all week, they gave us what they call Cinderella Liberty, which means we could leave the base, but we had to be back by midnight. Plus they gave us a whole bunch of other instructions and places and restrictions. So here I am enumerating all these things, saying what they can do. And we'd already changed into civilian clothes. So as I'm walking away, one of my guys needed to ask a question, and he forgot my name. So he read what was on the back of my shirt.
Oh.
Magic Mushroom.
Oh.
So I became Magic Mushroom. And after using it exclusively for 6 years, my father-in-law, while I was whining about how I could get my license as Mushroom, but not my bank account that way, I could, you know, he goes, either